get a lot of feedback, probably more feedback from parents than the administration does. But we get a lot of feedback from parents, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to consider that. It's one thing, as I said, to say that you're going to consider feedback and that you have a continuous improvement model. It's another thing to actually utilize that feedback to improve the model. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear on a couple of these items. With respect to SchoolNet, which everybody has complained about, I can add my name to that list. I remember being at one of the school Halloween events, and one of the teachers was telling me about SchoolNet, and somehow I garbled the name SchoolWeb or something like that, and I said, okay, it's SchoolWeb, and about 5 people said SchoolNet, and they all said it with derision. So that does have to be fixed, and as with any system that you roll out, you can't test it enough before you roll it out to 10,000 people. So I appreciate the fact you recognize the problems with that, and hopefully they are being fixed now. With respect to not distinguished teachers, but differentiating between teachers, I appreciate what you said, that you were going to try to get that in place this upcoming January, right, for the next semester. That is one of the things that I heard so often over the last 2 years, is that differentiating based on the need for coaching and the need for extra help just makes a whole lot of sense. And that differentiation, I think, should include not only in spot observations, but in lesson plans and things like that. And we had a conversation recently about lesson plans, and if you would just explain what the guidelines are for lesson plans generally.
Yeah, thanks for giving me that opportunity, Trustee Mr. Kay. We also put it in the notes from the superintendent. You can read that on the hub and online. Because there has been input or feedback from teachers, principals, and trustees about lesson plans, mostly from teachers, and there's some confusion around that. Let me start off first by saying lesson planning is a bread and butter of a teacher, and teachers do it all over the world, all the time, and the most effective teachers have good lesson plans. Doesn't mean it has to be collected or reviewed or anything else. And so there is no district requirement, and has not been, at least since I've been here, for teachers to turn in lesson plans. Yes, there has been a requirement to do lesson objectives and DOLs, and we can talk about those all day long, but not lesson plans. We have trained principals on, if they're going to ask for lesson plans, what are effective lesson, what do they look like? And there's model lesson plans, et cetera, that we've given them. And we've actually told principals specifically, please don't do the scripting lesson plans. I grew up with the Madeline Hunter, and you'll remember that. It's a Madeline Hunter lesson plan, but we don't require that even. That was a little bit more rigorous. So it is up to the building principal. The guidance to building principals that if you have an effective teacher, effective teachers should not have to turn in lesson plans. That's my guidance. But again, we want to leave that to the principal. And struggling teachers, or teachers who are maybe the first year, somebody should be looking at their lesson plans if they're struggling with different concepts. And that's okay.
You want to do that again for the tape? Teachers watch it again.
I think I got most of it. Oh, say it one more time?
Yeah, just make sure.
There are no requirement at this level for lesson plans. Our guidance to principals, first of all, it's a building level decision. But our guidance is if you have distinguished or effective teachers, you should not ask them for lesson plans. But if the teacher is struggling, or some of the novice new teachers, if I was a principal, I'd probably require lesson plans of them. But that is still a building choice. EDs are not collecting them, they're not scoring them. So it is up to the principal.
And then I think you said, with respect to spot observations, grading spot observations, one of the things that came back from several people that suggested what they thought would be helpful was for spot observations not to be graded, so that when the principal, assistant principal, comes into the room and does the observation, that the observation becomes all about coaching and mentoring and less about policing and compliance. And I think you said that is a decision that would be up to the building principal at this point?
Yes, sir. So based on additional feedback that we got from you, and Trustee Cowan and Trustee Foreman, but also from teachers over time, I took it to the principal's focus group yesterday and asked them about this notion of a number being on the spots. Those of you who've been around, you've been here for a while, you know, we grade different aspects. There is no overall score on the spot observation, but there's a score for engagement, lesson objective, and those scores are 1.5 to 2.5, etc. And we've had this discussion with principals for the last 2.5 years. And the reason for even having any number on there or any kind of grade is most teachers, our experience is most teachers, when you give them feedback and you have a comment that validates something, this is how we write our spot observation, something that invites reflection and a helpful hint, and you put no score or no indication on there, the teacher is going to come back and ask the principal, okay, thank you for the validation comment, thank you for the reflective question, and thank you for the helpful hint. How did I do? Did I do okay? Am I in the ballpark, or do you like me? So I kicked it to the principals, and overwhelmingly the principals said yesterday, no, we need to keep the number, which is kind of ironic because 2.5 years ago I had to kind of prod them a little bit to even think about the number, but now they want to keep it. So as a compromise, what we did last night is say, look, it'll be a building decision, and I encourage them to make that decision collaboratively with their teachers. And you hear it on tape now. So building principals now own this number business. If they don't want the number, they don't have to have the number. If they want to put, moving in the right direction and then not moving in the right direction, that's fine too. If they want to put exemplary, proficient, progressing, unsat for each of these that's fine too. Whatever they think they want, they can do. If they want to get rid of it, they can get rid of it. Because in the end of the day, it doesn't really add up to a number for the evaluation. It was all about coaching and about giving teachers some feedback that they can rely on. But if the number, and this is what I heard you say, Trustee Mishke, the number seems to be getting in the way of coaching in many places, then let's get rid of the number. So that's what I said earlier.
Okay. I appreciate that, and I did get some feedback the other way that the number was important from one of the principals that I asked to show growth.
Right.
But I appreciate the way you've taken that comment and suggestion into consideration. On the testing of the specials, I can only tell you that all of the feedback that I've received from parents has been negative. All of it. And I could see that it's possible that testing in those areas might result in some improvement in those areas, but my thought is, as we look at all of the issues that we have to address in DISD, where all of the problems are, where our kids are, we have more than half of our kids not reading at grade level by third grade. I just devote so much time, energy, resources, and capital to the testing of the specials, and it just, I would think that making a change there sooner rather than later would be better. I know you want to run this through your group, through the focus groups, but I'm just saying that there wasn't a single parent, and I think I've got an unscientific sample of about 100 who thought that that was a good thing. So I offer you that feedback because I get it. I live 5 miles away from every school in my feeder patterns and the Woodrow feeder pattern. So I run into people all the time, and it's I wanted to stay in the house for the past 2 weeks with the kind of feedback I've had on the specials. We also talked about trying to reduce the number of tests where you have an ACP and a STAR testing in the same course. Of course, they're not going to totally overlap, but that was one of the suggestions that was made several times. To the extent we can reduce testing, we should try to do that. We've covered so many of the other questions I was going to ask you about, so I'm going to stop here. But again, I thank you for taking the feedback and for looking at it as a constructive way to improve what we're trying to do. Thanks.
Mr. Foreman.
Trustee Solis, I'm as you know, a new board member, and if I try to punt on something this important again, remind me I need to go first.
Okay. All right.
It takes a long time to get it.
Remind me. I will not punt again.
Sounds good.
I promise you. I have a few questions because I am new. Just like Trustee Mitch K, I'm out in the community a lot, and I can't go to the cleaners or the grocery store or anything else without running into parents and teachers talking about some of the issues with DISD and some of it with TEI, with some other things too. One of the things that I've been wondering is, because they talk a lot about the testing and how much testing is going on with the children. So I'm just wondering, is there a measurement that we're using in terms of, if we look at how much we've spent on testing material for the last 5 years per year? I understand it's somewhere around $700,000, $600,000. This year, I understand we're spending about $3.7 million on testing. Is that about accurate?
I would have to see the numbers. I
Okay,
have no
do me a favor.
understanding of
Somebody
those
call
numbers.
somebody and go get the numbers for me.
On testing materials. Can you
Materials.
help us
It's gotta
understand
be
what
on
you
the
mean by
budget.
that? Like a test that we purchase?
Yes.
All right,
testing
test we
materials.
purchase.
So somebody call somebody and help me to understand that. Okay, thank you for that, because I'll come back to that. On the TEI experts,
Sorry.
on the TEI experts, are those teachers or coaches, academic coaches, or assistant principals? Who are those people?
They're teachers
They're all
from the
teachers.
schools.
They're all teachers from the schools.
Yeah, I don't want to misspeak, but that's what they were asked to do. 2 teachers from each school.
Okay, all right. I just needed that. And do they get continuous training?
Yes.
Or they just had that one?
No, it's ongoing.
4-hour? So how many trainings have they had?
2 in August. It was October and November, or October? Yeah, October and November.
And they are sharing with the teachers, because just like a lot of the other trustees, I'm hearing that a lot of teachers still don't really understand all of TED. So we do a lot of marketing at this district, a lot of it. And I don't understand why we can't make sure the teachers understand exactly what they're in for. So we need to do a better job of that. I've had a lot of complaints about SchoolNet also, so you can put my name on that list of people who are saying they have some problems with getting online. But I know,
I think it may be unanimous.
but not only that, to find out that all of the teachers have not been trained is also concerning to me. This is something so important. We should be making sure that we train them. Superintendent Myers, I understand you to say that the scoring on the spot observations is going to be pushed to the building level, so that's campus level. What if an ED feels like they want all of their campuses to score on the spot observations? How would that work?
So the ED does not have that authority because we have said that the principals, it's a campus level decision. Now, we have some pretty good EDs, and they're trying to get the job done too. And they've been coached about what coaching means. Even on some other decisions, EDs can be a little bit more directive when the school is struggling or the principal is struggling and having major difficulties. But in this case, no. If the principal wants to do the way they want to do it, EDs have to allow that.
I want to make sure that's understood. On the distinguished teachers, they are recommended by principals?
Correct.
What if there is a teacher who feels like they should be a part of the process and they're not?
It is the principal's decision. The teacher could have a conversation with that principal.
So if the principal doesn't feel like the teacher is distinguished then, or should be a part of the process, then the teacher doesn't get in.
Correct.
Don't you think there should be some kind of appeal process for the teachers? Because a lot of times things are done based on relationships. And some teachers, can we finish? I know you're ready to jump in. But some teachers might be great teachers that belong in that category, but they might not be in line with where the principal think they should be. And it just appears to me, because one of the things I'm struggling with as a new board member is the number of experienced teachers that's walking from this district. I am struggling with that. You guys might not be, but I am. Because with all these IR schools that we have, first year and second year teachers are not going to get it. And so I just believe that we should be opening up ourselves to these teachers and giving them every opportunity to get where they need to be or where they feel like they need to be, if at all possible. That's a suggestion.
Did you want me to respond?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at
I
Carmen.
don't-
Go
I don't
ahead.
think-
You may if you'd like.
So, one of the long-term benefits of TEI is to take relationship or whether I liked you or popularity out of the equation. It is to calibrate across the system. So down the road, we'll have a much more rigorous definition of what effectiveness is, and the principal will have less control over achievement scores or student surveys. Right now, 100% of a teacher's PDOS evaluation can be a little bit more subjective than we want it to be. TEI is much more objective. And we have a first year problem, which is we don't have any pass scores. Next year, if a teacher insists and has at least a proficient evaluation, they can insist on a summative evaluation done by the time the DTR process starts. This year they can insist because we don't know who's effective and who's not. And so we are relying on the principals, yes, but we have always relied on principals to evaluate their staff. So we're relying on principals now to get it right. Will there be some teacher out there that a principal doesn't think is eligible for DTR and therefore does not do a summative? Out of 10,000 teachers, probably. But the same thing can apply with the PDOS, right? There are teachers who complain about their evaluations all the time. But in the end of the day, it's up to the principal, and we will have data on principals and their evaluation of teachers over time, and we will eliminate those principals who don't do a fair and accurate and rigorous job of evaluating teachers.
Superintendent Miles, I understand the difference in PDOS and TEI. What I don't have is time to get down the road. For me, every year, every day, every minute is important to the kids that we have to teach. So, I mean, I understand all of that.
It's a good thing we started.
I understand all of that. And theory is good. But I remind you that we are losing experienced teachers. I believe 54% of our new hires this year had no experience.
Somewhere in there.
Somewhere in that number. 54% of our new hires had no experience. That's a problem for me. Can't speak for these other people. I can just speak for me. And we're not going to get there. Another question that I have, and Carmen, you or Superintendent can answer. If you have an experienced teacher, 20 years, how much would they possibly be making?
Currently?
No stipend.
I don't have the compensation guide in front of me, but I can look it up for you.
Yeah,
real quickly.
I don't really need it. I'm
20-year
just
teacher?
20-year teacher.
Probably making about $63,000.
Okay, so if and that's what I need, because if they are classified as a distinguished teacher, and you're saying it's at 59.
I'm sorry, it's at 60. The 20-year teacher is actually that's step 20. 20-year teacher is making $57,311 on a bachelor's degree.
Okay, on a bachelor's degree. See, I got one on a master's degree.
On a master's degree, if you have 20 years of experience, you're making $60,442.
The reason I asked that question, on the distinguished teachers, if you're at, what is it, proficient 2?
What about proficient 2?
It could be up
Proficient
to
2 and higher.
$59,000. So what if you have one of these teachers that's been a 20-year teacher and they become a distinguished teacher? How does their salary equate to that? Do they stay where they are, or do they get more money?
It depends what level they're on. So on this scale here, some of the information that Superintendent Miles shared previously, there's a dollar amount associated. So depending where they are on the distinguished teacher scale will determine. They could get an increase.
And they could not.
Depends on their current salary.
That's right.
That's what I was trying to get to. So why would it benefit a 20-year teacher to become a distinguished teacher and they can't get any more money?
Because they could become proficient 3 at $65,000.
Yeah, but they have to reapply every year.
This year, if you are a 20-year teacher and you go through the distinguished review process, there will be some teachers who get exemplary by rule. We have to have a certain percentage of exemplary teachers. Some teachers will be proficient 3, and some people will be proficient 2. And some won't make it and they'll be proficient 1. So that, it doesn't matter how many years of experience you have, that 20-year vet should apply because they could get proficient 3. And you would hope that with that many years of experience, they're going to, knock the socks out. off of it.
We would hope, but there's a possibility that they won't.
That's correct.
And there's a possibility that they would get nothing.
That's
And
also
that's where I'm going, where there's a hole there for me. Because I am concerned about the experienced teachers. This is great for people who haven't had a lot of experience. 3 years is no experience in the teaching field.
So,
And so, let me finish it with this.
sure.
And so, there has to be another look at how we're gonna handle those particular teachers. Because what we don't wanna do is set up a system that targets only new teachers. That would be bad for this district. Because we are,
Sorry, I'm sorry. Apologize.
because I'm on a rant. If you make me wait this long, I'm gonna talk.
You're never good.
Haven't said a word yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot you haven't had a chance. Okay, I'll cut it off in a minute. Just give me one more point. I've made that point. You do understand what I'm saying?
Yes, we've discussed that.
We are in a competitive arena,
Yes.
extremely competitive. We have 43 IR schools. First year, second year, third year teachers are not gonna get it. We need experienced teachers, and we have to incentivize experienced teachers. This system, to me, I have no ownership in TEI. I wasn't here. So I can speak very frankly about it. I have no ownership. But this system does not seem to weigh in on the experienced teachers, and we need to look at that. And I'll leave with one last statement. Superintendent Miles, while I respect, and I thank you for listening to us, by the way, when we came to talk to you. But while I respect trying to be open to some new ideas, one of the things that work best for most people is consistency. And so while you got one campus doing one thing and another campus doing another thing, we might run into some additional problems as we begin to continue to move through this process. And so for me, there needs to be some form of consistency. I understand autonomy, but there has to be consistency so that we're all on the same page. Thank you.
If I could, the last point on consistency, you're certainly right. There has to be a balance towards autonomy for letting school buildings do what they need to do, and then parameters that we have at the district level. And we will continue to try to strike that balance.
Trustee Count. Trustee Count.
Yeah, just real quick, just short, because I know Trustee Solis wants to talk, but feedback we kind of gave you the other night, if we're going to continue with the numerical spot observations, then it would help the teachers tremendously if we can train them up to know what a DLO looks like. And a 1, a 2, and a 3, because that's what we're also hearing, is that you come into my classroom, you give me a 1, but I don't know what you're looking for, and just looking at my board, walking out the door, doesn't help me. So, thank you. Just wanted to get that point before we move on.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on the testing issue because I do have the benefit of being part of the conversation, but there's been a lot of feedback that I've received from different types of schools. For example, Montessori, the question is, why do we test in areas that are not consistent with the methodology and consistent with the pedagogy of, that type of education? Why are we adding layers that aren't otherwise required? That's a continual question. I know it came up last year with Harry Stone. It's out there at Dealey. I presume Mata will eventually get there on that one as well. And the second is the question about art, music, physical education. The test question came up for the point from the parents about we're testing for whose sake? Are we testing the child so we can help them improve in those areas, or are we testing to have a metric by which to evaluate the teacher? And that question, I don't feel today has adequately been addressed. And again, I think there's a general feeling around the horseshoe here that testing in some fields is overreaching prospectively. But if there's an argument to be made for children, as I think our superintendent talked about, improving their ability. that's fine, but I think somebody needs to make sure that that's clear, especially to the parents, because they don't see it right now. Thank you.
No problem. Dr. Terry, you got the answer. This is the answer. If we get this answer, then all of our problems are solved.
Right.
Trustee
I might have a new problem.
Yeah, Trustee Farley had a question that she'd asked me.
The answer, we're researching it as I speak. So as soon as I get it sent to me, I will bring it forward.
Okay.
Trustee Mitchell.
Well, just one last general comment on TEI, which the superintendent and I have already discussed. But what I hear is from a lot of people is there's just too much paperwork and too many meetings, and I don't know where you can minimize meetings or minimize paperwork, but I would ask that you talk to the TEI focus group and have that be one of their goals, to try to come up with ways to reduce the administrative burden of having this system in place. Thank you.
All right. Let me take a different approach for a second. I think it's very important to highlight that TEI to date looks extremely different than TEI in the initial draft of Destination 2020. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there are some significant differences.
And what would you attribute that to?
I think it's because we had teacher input, we've had groups meeting for the last 3 years, is what I would attribute it to. I'm sorry to interrupt, but a commitment to a continuous improvement model. That's not just something we're saying here at this table. We've been saying this since I got here, and I know even before I got here.
I was here before you got here. And when I was a teacher, the only conversations I had about PDOS were with my principal trying to figure out what the score meant, and other teachers as we complained about PDOS. I was never invited to go talk to the superintendent. I was never invited to go talk to the chief of school leadership. I didn't know who that was. I think TEI looks a lot different because of the same reason you do, and because of the facts. Because you have talked more in the past 2 to 3 years to teachers than I believe a superintendent or a cabinet ever has before. And I would love for somebody to challenge me on that. Because if it has happened, then let's go back and look at exactly how they communicated. But I can tell you this, it probably wasn't good, because I was a teacher in 2009 and in 2010, and most of what we did as teachers when it came to PDOS was complain about the lack of communication, the fact we didn't know what was going on, and what CEI was, even what CEI, the acronym, stood for. So we've been talking about acronyms and not understanding those things for some time. It's one of the things that we as teachers do, is like to kick around acronyms. So I think that's important to highlight. I also think it's important to highlight that just the process of an evaluation through TEI and the multiple opportunities that a teacher has to be able to ask a question of their evaluator around the process, around what if I'm doing this, am I on the path to being a distinguished teacher? We have created, you and your administration and this process have created more opportunities to be able to have a substantive conversation about their evaluation and the coaching component of the evaluation. And in many instances, the opportunity to be able to challenge, or if you don't feel comfortable challenging, being able to talk to another educator in the school about what they are seeing in their evaluation process, which is a healthy and a substantive conversation to be having as a teacher in a school. And to make it less about complaining about a system that we know isn't setting us up to be successful at all, and more, if we're going to complain about a system that we know at the very least is providing us multiple opportunities to have a discussion about the quality of instruction that I'm providing as a teacher, because I've got more of objective, we hope it would be objective data points to talk about with our evaluator and with other educators. And that's important. That's important to a teacher. It's also important to a teacher to begin to wrap your mind around break down the mystery of what an effective teacher is, what it looks like in this district. Through PDOS, when I was a teacher, it was a mystery. We didn't know what good was or what great was. And just through the Distinguished Teacher Review process, I'm not even talking about the whole system right now, but just through the Distinguished Review process, you are beginning to create not a myth, but a reality of what a highly qualified and effective instructor in this school system is. And I think that's critical, because it breaks the myth, the shroud of secrecy. My first question would then be, what are the plans, and if you can make it brief, please, what are the plans to spread that message once we know who these distinguished teachers are, or what a potential distinguished teacher looks like?
So, I'll be brief, kind of, because we realize that we have to paint a picture of the bar of what distinguished teaching looks like. So the plan is, once we get teachers to apply, we're going to take a number of those applications. We're going to take names off. We're still going to ask teachers if we can use their applications, and then take their name. And we're going to we're going to show people what these applications look like, so that other teachers can see that, oh, here's an elementary art teacher's application. We took the name off, took the schools off, and identified information, but this is a person who taught at the university. This is a person who taught YMCA on the weekends, or volunteered mentoring kids at church, or whatever it is. And we're going to show these great teachers, and so other teachers are going to say, oh, shoot, that's what a great fourth grade teacher does. So we're going to have that. Then once we go through the process and we have these distinguishing teachers, we're going to advertise that as well. We'll say, these are the exemplary teachers, and we're going to ask them if we can share their evaluation or their application. We're going to say, this is why this person is exemplary, this is why this person is proficient 3. And so I think what you're saying, the question behind the question is, will these other teachers know where that bar is? And we're going to use this process, as you've intimated, to define that bar even more. But people need a picture of it. They don't need the words in a handbook, which I'm looking at, but they need a picture of what a distinguished teacher looks like, and we're going to give them lots of pictures.
But we're not supporting experienced teachers when it comes to the Distinguished Teacher Review. That's what I'm hearing. But let's break that down for a second. To become a distinguished teacher, you have got to have multiple examples of your adding value to the profession of teaching. And you're more likely to do that if you are I'm giving you a what? Experienced teacher.
Right.
So intuitively, if I had to make a guess, and I don't bet, but if I had to make a bet, a majority of those distinguished teachers are probably going to be what?
Experienced.
Probably so. And they will begin to set a bar extremely high for the new teachers that are coming into this district that we know immediately need to begin to get better to become a distinguished teacher. So I would challenge this idea that we're not supporting experienced teachers through this process. How often are you meeting with teacher associations about this particular evaluation system? You or your staff?
I can't speak for. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. We meet on a monthly basis, but I talk to my colleagues probably a couple times a week. I mean, we're not limited to our monthly meetings. If they have questions, concerns, ideas, feedback, they can contact me at any point in time, which they do, so it's an ongoing dialogue.
What do those conversations look like? Without revealing details, because you have confidentiality and things along those lines, what do those conversations look like?
a variety of things. Specifically related to TEI, it could be some misunderstandings that are in the field or something that is working well, or very specific situations that need follow-up to ensure that the process is being implemented with fidelity. So we work together closely to make sure any misconceptions are clarified and then any missteps are corrected to ensure a positive experience.
And in those conversations, are the majority of the misconceptions that you're hearing some of the same misconceptions that the superintendent is now dedicating potential change to?
Correct, and some of the other concerns that have been outlined today by other trustees.
I think that's important. I think that's important because I remember hearing a while back under this administration and going to school board meetings with previous administrations that the superintendent and staff were not taking the time to meet with associations and with other groups as well outside of associations for whatever reason. Maybe I misinterpreted that, but I can at least go on what I know now, and that is you're taking the time again to listen and seek out opinions from others. It will continue to inform this process. It's an iterative process. And what I haven't heard you say, Superintendent, in any of the conversations we're talking about with TEI and the conversations that you've had with certain trustees is the words absolutely not.
No, because it's absolutely not. Because it's a continuous improvement model, and we're serious about that. Look, we know we don't have all the answers. We knew 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago that we didn't. It is version 1. And as long as we stay true to the principles of the concept of TEI, then much can be allowed. I happen to want all voices to impact a decision rather than just have a small group. So that's why we have been talking to teachers, principals, EDs, and I've been talking to a lot of community members and parents too, and a lot of small groups and town hall meetings. So much can be changed if it makes sense for our teachers.
And I would also challenge you to stick to the core principles and the central tenets of this evaluation system. A couple more things and I'm done. When was the word distinguished teacher review and distinguished teachers first used?
2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
That's what I remember. I also remember knowing and having a very meaty conversation during a TEI workshop about how you become a distinguished teacher. That's why I'm not shocked whenever you say to become a proficient 2 or 3 or exemplary 1 or 2 teacher, you have to go through a process.
Yeah.
That's not new. We can make it sound like it's new and play it up for the cameras, but it's not new. We've known that for some time. Here are some of my thoughts to help drive the conversation. Some of what you've heard, and I'm not going to go in depth. The idea of tight and loose controls needs to continue to be worked out. We have many good teachers and principals who are doing very good work, and at some point, I believe, have got to be able to be provided an opportunity to have some of these standards that we've set across the board, universal standards, relieved. I'm not saying don't go through any process, but you've got to find it, and I think we're coming to the point where you got to strike that balance. Tight and loose. ACPs. I'm glad we're having a conversation about ACPs. I'd love to have more conversations about ACPs, because as a teacher in this district, the bane of my existence was an ACP, because I never felt like the ACP was getting my kids ready to be prepared for STAR or anything else. In fact, I thought I created better tests than the ACPs, and so I would give my students a test before the ACP, and most of the time, at the end of the year, those tests, my tests better informed my students' results on TACs at that time than ACPs. So if we want to have a conversation about scrapping ACPs, I'm ready to have that conversation, so long as we are thoughtful about it and that our educators are still establishing assessments that allow them to be informed throughout the year as to where each of their students are, Because if you don't know where your students are, and particularly if you don't know the gaps your students have, you cannot be an effective instructor. You can't, it doesn't inform your teaching practices. Teachers do have to do lesson plans in Dallas ISD. It's in policy.
EUP regulation.
It's in regulation. So they, so,
So we're gonna be changing regulations.
okay, let's just, they can play the tape all they want. If they miss the tape, they're gonna look at the regulations.
Yes,
So let's fix the regulations,
yes.
okay?
We're in the process of doing it.
And, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just talking. Consistency. Work on consistency, calibration. It's hard to do in a year. It's hard to do in 2 years. You're never going to calibrate 100% in this district. Let's just accept it. You're not going to. So you can try to get it perfect. You're not going to. Try to get it as best as you can and continuously refine that process. The last thing I want to ask is, probably the most critical component of TEI is going to be the feedback loop, and that needs to be solid in every aspect of it. So with the Distinguished Teacher Review, I can already tell you one of the things that's going to happen is that the teachers that don't get to be a distinguished teacher after they've already applied, they're going to need to know why they weren't. And if there are other systems right now that are in place, and we've talked about this, where people trying to become principals are not getting the feedback they need to know, if I didn't become a principal this year, what do I do to become a principal next year? We got to fix that feedback loop, and I think you need to make sure you're prepared to have a feedback loop solid for the Distinguished Teacher Review. And the last thing is, I think it'd be smart. You've had a lot of questions and a lot of opportunity to clarify. Teachers may not have the time to watch the entire meeting. I'd cut out these 3 hours, which we are now about to be on, cut the video out, and I'd send it to all the teachers. Because if I'm a teacher who has been complaining about this system, and these are the questions that they want to have answered, you're answering a lot of those questions right now. If I'm an educator, I'm that serious about wanting to get better and to understand this system so I can be prepared to be the best in TEI, I'm going to take every opportunity possible to get my answers. And I think you've answered a lot of questions right now. So I'd say cut the 3 hours here, send it out to all educators so that they have the opportunity to watch this over the weekend, over multiple weekends to get some of these answers. And that's it. So trustees, we are now on to policy updates. Trustee Cowan, would you please lead us through your policies? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, today, how's our temperature? How's the temperature?
A little cool.
Feels cold?
Little cool.
Yeah, that's what Louis said. So you think it's
That's what we want.
Now ready for the exciting world of policy making?
Policy rules the world. That's the world already. Policy rules the world. All right, Bernadette.
Okay, we're on to discussion of board policy, BDA, local officer and official duties and requirements of depository Dino. Jim Terry.
Jim Terry.
It says Dino. It says Dino on the presenters. You
I
can't.
can sit. It's an update from TASB with the recommendations. This is actually, the law has been on the books for quite a while. I worked with Dr. Terry in the development of this, looking at the TASB recommendation. And we're just bringing this forward, and it brings us in alignment with allowing the superintendent to select the depository, whether that be by the method in which he does that by RFP or competitive bidding. And then the other is to bring us, the allowable collateral is a requirement under the government code.
Correct.
Trustee Porter.
Quick question, how is it currently done?
The depository currently is done, is an RFQ goes out, can go out every odd year. And you can have two-year options to keep the depository. So this district, I believe, has been with Bank of America quite some time and was selected, and I believe we're in the first of a two-year option.
Okay, so let me understand, you gave me two answers. You said every odd year you could go out.
Every odd year it was required to go out under the TEA regulations.
So has...
Nothing's changed. Nothing has changed. As a matter of fact, this really was not a policy. It's a new policy that was put out by TASB.
I'm still confused. So what are we currently doing?
Right now, we are under a two-year agreement with Bank of America.
And how did we get to that two-year agreement?
We probably went out back in 2013 with an RFQ and asked for responses.
Okay, so we're not sure how we got there.
No, I'm not sure how we got there. It was an RFQ went
Okay,
out
I'm just
there.
trying to make sure, because you said we probably. So when you say probably to me,
Yeah,
that means
you're right.
I don't know.
You're right.
So I'm just trying to make sure. And you said we've been with Bank of America for how long?
That I don't know exactly how long.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. Now on to 6B, discussion of board policy CAA local fiscal management goals and objectives, financial ethics. Jim Chair.
This proposal is to strike language from the policy addressing an investigation regarding employees' morale, ethics, or behavior, conduct that does not involve fraud or financial improprieties. The text addressing this type of investigation is more appropriately addressed in board policy DH local employee standards of conduct. So we are taking it out of this policy.
Trustee Porter.
What language was that?
It's on page 4 of 10.
Okay, I can't see.
Is this language being moved to the other rule or the other policy, or is it?
Very similar language.
Yes.
Similar or the same? Similar could mean a lot of things. Is it the same language? Does it have the same effect?
Same effect.
So
And I'd have to look at it.
could you please, because similar doesn't mean the same
Let me
thing.
see exactly.
We're moving into DH, which is the last item
So these,
on the policy agenda.
yeah.
Is there anything else on DH that's changing?
DH, a lot's changing in DH.
So this paragraph,
Where in
the
DH?
CAA is being moved to DH.
Well, something similar.
Similar, right?
Where in
Being-
DH?
Doesn't mean it's the same paragraph.
Well,
Where in DH is it being moved? So I can see the similar language. I was looking for where in DH is it being removed.
Over on page 3 of 10, what it's saying is the professional standards office, which is what's being taken out of CAA, which pertains to the internal audit. It says the professional standards office will conduct and/or coordinate all investigations of employee misconduct within the district that are not related to financial impropriety. then it has a reference to CAA logo and CHE logo.
Okay, so we took out moral or ethical. We took those two things out, right?
Yes, ma'am.
We'll get to that one out. Stay.
But back to CAA, any other? Yeah,
That's the only change.
sorry.
Yes.
Okay, now on item C, consider take possible action to approve amendment to board policy CDC local, other revenue grants from private sources.
This is what we had brought in the previous month with the guidelines of the board. We have going to bring to the board any gift over $5,000 to be ratified and accepted by you on a quarterly basis.
What changed from last month? Did
Well,
we add?
it's quite a, I think on page 104, the district encourages acceptance of public gifts, so right under gifts, grants, and bequests is most of the changes. As you can see, we went through the whole policy and made changes. Also on beginning of page 3 of 4, you can see where we deleted, the acceptance of the gifts by the board directly. So we've streamlined this policy. And we're bringing actually a more defined list or a lower list because we're starting at 5,000 instead of 25,000, and we'll bring that to the board for their acceptance. But what it does is allows us to accept the DIS and continue to do the work as the grantee has given us the money to do.
Is that what we discussed last month?
Yes.
About changing
The
the
way grants,
any
donations are
donation
handled.
requires, I'm looking for the ratifications. I'm bringing it to the board.
The board will receive a monthly notice of all gifts, grants above 5,000, consider such items for ratification on a quarterly basis. So page 1 of 4, right underneath the,
I see it.
okay.
And this now, with that remark right there, I know there was some concerns about the use of the word ratification, and we had some further discussions with the legal office. And because the board is actually already authorizing the district to do this, we could actually change that word to accept rather than ratification, because the ratification, you're already approving the action. You're just now coming back and you've authorized the board to do that, the district.
Trustee Matt?
I would be in favor of that particular language change just to eliminate confusion, although the word accept itself strikes me as marginally confusing. If we could use perhaps the word acknowledge, which is more or less what we're doing, if you think that is legally consistent and it's consistent with the board's thought process, that might be a minor suggestion. The other thing I was going to point out is I thought we had talked about notification for everything above 25,000, which is the current threshold. I was just going to point that out because what we had discussed, board members at the last meeting, was 25,000. They have $5,000 in the policy as written now. Has anybody got strong feelings on that one way or the other?
That was the original language.
Then I'd say let's go to my recommendation would also then be to go to consistent with the board's conversation on this last board meeting, which was 25,000. If somebody has strong feelings, I don't care, but if not, that's
Trustee
I have some feelings about acknowledge. I don't like ratification either, but I would prefer ratification or accept. Because to acknowledge it doesn't mean anything to me. So I don't like that language at all. And there are a couple of places in here that concerns me just a little bit, Jim. On 1 of 4, the last paragraph. The superintendent of schools or designee, striking the board, reserves the right to specify the manner in which the gifts are made, to define the types of gifts or grant that it considers appropriate. I have some concerns about that, simply because I think that as a board, we are ratifying or we are accepting the gift, and the board should be the superintendent and the board, or something to that extent. Because that was one of my concerns about this whole policy change, was to take away the board's ability to be involved in this process. Then on page 3 or 4, under gifts, grants, and donations for construction of major capital improvements, you struck the board and said the superintendent of schools or designee may accept gifts, grants, bequests, and donations to assist in construction of major capital improvement to any district facility. I think that the board should be making those decisions and not the superintendent. So I would have a severe problem with that also. And other. Somebody else can speak maybe on that last one.
Trustee Jones?
Thank you. I think we're talking about two separate things. The change that is being proposed here, as I understood it, is the board would be receiving a notice, and the threshold on notice, I thought, was $5,000 for the benefit of just having the transparency of knowing what's coming in. What we may want to do is say the ratification on a quarterly basis is back to the $25K so that you keep that consistent. But my understanding was, at least on the notice, that was supposed to be the roster of all gifts coming in the door to keep us informed about what we're receiving from various parties. The second issue that it occurs to me, having just gone through our E-rate training, is gifts can be time, and we're not really reflecting time or the value of time in the way we're looking at our gifting policies. So I'm wondering if that's an oversight that we need to correct to be in full disclosure and compliance with both E-rate and, I would assume, best practice on general gifting, because I know the IRS under a 990 rule now requires that be also disclosed. So I have another look at that. And then the other issue that I bring out is, I think we talked about other districts we were looking at as models. Does this current language follow anybody else or any other guidelines that are out there?
I think with the exception of Houston, most of the districts, go ahead, Jerry, you're the expert.
Well,
I will give the floor to both of the survey.
Austin has no reference to board acceptance. The superintendent department designees approved donations. Fort Worth has no reference to board acceptance. Superintendent and designee has authority to accept grants and contributions valued at more than $10,000. Houston, board approval at $5K. Procedure is just a summary list, and they usually don't have small gifts in their summary list. And then San Antonio, no reference to board procedure. So,
was this modeled from the Houston? The current draft, this current.
Actually, it was taken from comments from the last. So we took what we had as a basis and then comments from the last meeting and modified it.
Okay. Because originally, I think when we talked about going to the quarterly ratification process, there was some discussion, I think, originally that was consistent with, other districts, and I guess just wanted to know if anybody else is doing it under that structure.
Austin does it annually, so they compile one big annual report, and the board blesses it. And as far as quarterly, there is There wasn't anything on a quarterly basis. It was just one thing that we decided.
Remind me about Houston. How did
Houston was board approval at 5K. It's a summary list, and we have, I think, a few samples too for Houston.
I'd like to take a closer look at that, Mona. Thank you.
Also,
We have Richardson also.
Richardson, yes.
on page 3 or 4, I think all major constructions and capital improvements need to remain in the board's responsibility. I don't remember all those changes because the district shall maintain ownership control over all major capital improvements. The district shall procure all goods and services required for major. I think that page 3 or 4 and 4 or 4, that when you're dealing with major, because I'm thinking about Booker T. Washington, the various major capital, that should remain. Because I think the property and it's the board's responsibility of major capital. And so
Jim, what's the justification for that? Or the reasoning?
It's consistent with the rest of the policy. I want to make sure that we know what we're talking about here. The old definition was everything above $25,000. Everything above $25,000 came to the board. And so what we talked about last month was that instead of everything above $25,000 coming before the board, we would ratify it quarterly. And so that this is the same kind of change because the definition for major capital improvements used to be things above $25,000.
and I'm saying this as a superintendent of schools.
Let Jim answer Eric's question.
Actually, I interrupted, but.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, they did interrupt, but you know,
sorry.
we're just,
Let Jim
but that's fine. It says the board may accept gifts, any donation that requires a fiscal change. It's still a major capital improvement. It said a value of $25,000 or more. I feel that the board must accept any gift or donation or request when it's dealing with major capital improvements. That should remain in the board's responsibility of major capital improvements to our buildings. I don't think that should remain in our control.
Well, I think when we look at CV Local, which deals with actual construction and so forth, we have a process in place for doing construction. That process also impacts this policy, so that if we do receive a donation, we're still obligated to make sure we follow the rules that are in CV Local also.
This deals with gifts from private sources. So just like we had Booker T and we have various, I feel that the board, and then y'all took out the district should maintain ownership and control over all major capital improvements.
So what I would say to that is a stipulation that we put in here, any kind of physical change to the building or grounds has to go through my office for approval and go through that process. You're saying that you want that to remain with the board,
all
basically.
Major capital improvements.
Gotcha.
We've had some major capital improvements of major donations, 10 million. That should come through major capital when you're getting ready to change a building, because number one, the board we got to y'all are trying to do a bond. We have this future facilities task force. We have all this that we're making changes. Seems to me that we should have a say-so in major capital that's going to impact our buildings. Because a major capital is going to be more than $25,000 anyway.
So an example I would bring is, for instance, playground equipment. So we have a donation from a citizen or a nonprofit that wants to donate $25,600 or worth of equipment to the district. So for us, on the definition, that's a major improvement, and are you saying that's something that should come to the board?
Assist in construction. Is that a major playground is construction?
Yeah, when you're putting it together.
Major capital improvements to any district facility. So will a playground be construction?
Yes, because you're putting it together on the district facility, on the district grounds, and we have to maintain it.
Yeah.
He does. Trustee Foreman, then Trustee Moore.
I don't need to help Trustee Nuttall, but let me just give some of you a history lesson. Booker T. Washington got major money when they built the new building. And there were some people that tried to change the name, even though it still came through the board. So what I believe Trustee Nuttall is saying is, we don't want to run into that. So when there is major, and I really don't call playground equipment construction, but that's me. You know, I'm not the smartest light bulb. But I think I am with Trustee Nuttall, because there are some people that might want to give major dollars for renovation of our schools. I want that money. But I don't want to run into the same kind of thing I had to deal with when the money came for Booker T. And by the way, the person who gave the money was a very nice person who went through a lot of things because the right things weren't in place. And so I don't want to get back to that. So I am with Trustee Nuttall in that if there is a major donation based on construction, it doesn't come through your office and go through a process. It comes through here and then it goes through its process, which should not be a problem. It should not be a problem.
Trustee Burke?
Let him speak so I can speak again.
And then you can file a complaint and say you bullying them.
That would be a violation of parliamentary procedure. But
You should never be a violation. I'll be not interrupting me.
every time something comes to this board, it slows the process down, and in some cases, the hurdle actually harms the gift in its entirety. So the example of the Booker T. Washington situation would be irrelevant to this particular policy change. You're talking about a name change, which is governed by a different board policy.
It was a gift.
If I can finish.
Maybe.
Eric, you got to run me, because I'll take it over and I'll.
No, it's fine.
Oh, you got it.
Now, you can't stop me when I'm
I know, but I'm saying, guys, we decorum. We're all on the same team. Trustee Kelly.
Trustee Murray?
So we have a policy that governs name changes to facilities. So all name changes have to be board approved. That happens whether we're spending the money on it, happens whether the money is donated for it. So you don't have to worry about name changes with regard to this particular policy. It's irrelevant. Now, the different questions, if you're talking about major capital changes and you don't want a wing added to a building unless it's got board approval. And if that's the case, then fine, but you got to look at the definition that exists here. It's $25,000 or more. That's not a wing of a building, that's playground equipment and a wing of a building. So if you absolutely insist that all these donations have to come through the board, then let's make this the definition of major capital improvements a major capital improvement. I mean, something $1 million or more would be a relevant major capital improvement. Considering the cost of elementary schools is about $25 million, that's a reasonable fraction of that.
Would you tell the trustee to please look at gifts, grants, and donations? It says major capital.
So, so I am not in favor of the recommended change to this particular paragraph at the request of the two trustees that brought that up. But back to the other point, though, it sounded like Trustee Jones was opposed to the raising of the ratification from 5,000 to 25,000. So
No, that's not what I said.
Unless you create some sort of bifurcation on it, I don't know that it's all that relevant. Why don't we just keep it at $5,000? If you guys have drafted, I don't think anybody else has feelings about one way or the other. And so that's the point. And on the other point on the language change, I'm fine not moving forward with acknowledgement, but I do think ratification is a better word than what you guys suggested. So I would just leave it as you originally recommended.
Improvement, you mean improvement, not ratification?
His acceptance.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
His acceptance.
So that's those two points. Anyways, I guess what that means is that I'm for the policy as it's written, and it sounds like we have a couple of trustees that are for the policy with changes in the major capital improvement section.
For anybody else who hasn't spoken already, this is our third read. We really just need to vote up or down and move on. So I wouldn't change any current language as it's on SIRE now, and just wait for any amendments at the board table, if that's okay. That's my suggestion. You can do what you want, but that's my suggestion to the board chair. Trustee Blackburn.
Well, I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Trustee Foreman was talking about, because I'm still on page 3 or 4 also. And the scenario that I was thinking about was Booker T. If someone gives us $1 million and say, I want to tear this wall down and do this and that, we're basically leaving up to Wonder Paul. And we are leaving up to Wonder Paul to say, okay, you can tear this wall down, you can tear this wing down, whatever. I don't feel comfortable in having that type of major changes to our structures without it coming to the board. So, we might have to put some dollar amounts change here and there, but I agree. This is going to take a little bit of a while at the board table. I'm going to remind trustees we have a policy that if you're going to make any policy changes to this amendment, we have to get it done the day before. So I suspect we'll have several amendments coming in. Thank you.
Trustee Solis.
CV local says that any construction over $50,000 has got to come back to the board.
CV local.
CV local.
When we're talking about gifts.
I understand, but once the gift becomes the property of the district, it's our property and we do what's best for the district. So what I would suggest is, just my suggestion, is that perhaps if we were to put a range in here, because again, most of the instances we deal with, and my department deals with, my division, is playground equipment. So if we put a range from, just a suggestion, from this dollar to that dollar, or provide more detail in the regulation. Maybe that would be helpful.
I refer to CV.
Or refer to CV local.
Trustee Solis, did you just have?
Another minute, Trustee Michigan, go.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on those suggestions, and maybe we could add a sentence that said that where clause that says subject to the $50,000 limit in whatever the other related rules.
CV.
local.
Yeah, so that would make it clear that if it's construction that's going to be over $50,000, it comes back to the board. We do want to get we want the gifts.
Most of this I agree with. I think I could be persuaded one way or the other as it relates to the physical change component. I think Trustee Mitchell is on the right track, but I would echo Trustee Cowan's comments that I think if you have an amendment, let's craft the amendment, let's get it in before that last day, and then let's have this conversation at the board table, because it's not that I don't want to rush an issue like this, but I do believe that we are right on the cusp of getting this right, and we should be able to have that discussion from an amendment component at the board table. That's the only thing I'll add. Thank you, Trustee Cowan.
All right. Before we move on, just a request. I don't know who has the Word version of this. Could I get the current Word version of this?
Can you send
Make
it
sure
to
everybody knows.
Send it to all.
Word version.
Word.
And let's also make sure that we're consistent with the red lines.
And can you send Houston's policy? You do.
Trustee Jones?
Didn't want to lose one of the threads from before. In places where there's compliance or other related requirements or consistency with either tax law or other related provisions, I think we should get those done before we start making amendments. And the one that came back to mind was the one that was raised about time and whether that under the E-rate or other areas needs to be valued, because it's not currently reflected in any of the language. And the second is with respect to the difference between information that comes before the board and what we ultimately approve, accept, or otherwise ratify. So, if those need to be the same, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy at the 5,000 level. I'd heard an alternative that said we get noticed at one level, but then we want to raise the number. Either way, I mean, my point was to to be consistent and make sure that we're getting as much information as possible, but if we want to ratify at a higher level, that's a different issue. So I just want to give us that option as well. And I do agree with the comments that have been said about if our policy is 50,000 and most playground equipment falls well below that. I mean,
No,
clearly
it's actually more.
Oh, it's more.
actually more.
Then I do think we need to maybe take a closer look at that. I mean, I personally don't want to see us lose the opportunity or delay an opportunity to get such valuable resources into our schools. And since that's not an area that we are doing a whole lot of improvement or spending around and people are being generous, that is an opportunity for us to maybe write specific language or something that deals with that and not try to blanket it on everything else. So we're very clear about that's an area of importance and focus and something that we can accept and streamline, but then not violate some of these other areas or open that door or create a slippery slope on other types of gifts. So that'd be, I think, another way to come at this.
Okay. Now on to 6D. Take possible action to approve the amendment to board policy CH local purchasing and acquisition. I believe the changes start on page 10 of 22.
Correct. And again, what this changes is to clarify what is an unauthorized, and in this case, authorized transactions, and what will be brought to the board for ratification. And for those who do not follow the procurement administrative procedures, that they're subject to disciplinary action.
Any? Trustee Form?
I still have the concerns on page 11 of 22. If the board has previously approved the dollar amount to be spent, then if there is a failure by staff to get a purchase order, there would be, it's not considered a ratification. And I understand where you say there would be disciplinary action, but the board wouldn't know about that. Because you would be the one that would be administering that action, correct, Mr. Terry?
Well, it'd be up to each chief, but it's not only the authorization, the dollar authorized by the board, but also there is a contract in place. So those two conditions have to be met. Is A, has been authorized, the dollar amount has been authorized by the board, and a valid contract is in place. Then if a purchase order is not issued, it becomes an administrative issue subject to disciplinary action.
And there's no dollar amount set up at it. We just saw where there were millions spent that way. So there's no dollar amount set on that.
No, those all would be brought back to the board for ratification because that is going over the authorized board amount. Anything that's unauthorized over the board amount, disciplinary action. In fact, the board policy says anything over 25%, and in fact, the law now says anything over 25% of the original amount is not gone through the procurement process is subject to, legal issues.
But if we've got a contract that's $50 million, 25%, you could do a lot of damage before we do it, right?
Well, we also think that I brought to this board the actions that we're taking to improve our controls in our procurement area, and we do not believe that, that's going to get beyond us again, 25%.
I still have some concerns about that particular part of it, as I've had in the past. That hasn't changed because, once again, the board would not be aware of these activities that were taking place.
Trustee Mitchell.
I'm wondering if you might be able to add at the end of that paragraph, the last sentence of which is, employees who fail to follow established administrative procedures are subject to disciplinary action, and then insert, and the board shall be notified within 30 days of the disciplinary action and the nature of the procedure that was not followed.
If I could comment on that, I'd be awful wary of publicizing or broadening the punishment to include reporting to the board in a formal way. We don't do that for any other personnel issues, and I'm not sure if there's any employment issues with that.
So the policy, what Jim references is actually going to be in a D policy. As a superintendent mentioned, every single time an employee faces a disciplinary action, it does not come to the board. And I think that would present some challenges and cause some concern.
Well, let me try to modify that concept. First of all, where we stand right now is if somebody has not followed policy that would come within this language, the board would know about it because we'd have to ratify it.
Yes, but
Yes.
I've had employees who did from human capital management and it needed to be ratified, and I brought it forward. The individual employee was not the one who had to own their particular action. I can represent my team.
Oh, okay, I think that's a fair consideration. What I'm really trying to get at is the question of just letting the board know when policies have not been followed. So if you have to invoke this language, maybe we should require you to tell us when you've used it, when circumstances happened, and what you did about it. Because right now you have to do that anyway, because we have to ratify it. So we're trying to streamline this. We can streamline it to make things go more smoothly with respect to the contract that we're obligated to perform under. But and so we can streamline the process, but at the same time not lose the knowledge of what happened.
So perhaps infractions by holistic division. So you could say how many ratifications did human capital management have rather than an individual employee.
Or just, but I mean, I think if we leave the regulations to us, what Trustee Mischke is saying makes sense. That we inform in writing quarterly or something like that. That makes sense, and then we'll figure out how to format it.
Well, we could put in the policy itself that the superintendent shall notify on a quarterly basis the board of any occurrence that is covered by this paragraph. We can massage that language between now and the time of the board meeting. But
can you capture that?
But my point is, if we want to just be more efficient, we can be more efficient without having to cut the board out of the knowledge of what's going on.
Trustee Jones?
And I would underscore that if it has anything to do with E-rate, that it is absolutely part of that same conversation, that there is full disclosure. So I add that provision as well. Thank you.
As with the previous policy, this is a third read, so any amendments?
Can I make one other point on this? And Jack, this would be for you. The circumstances described in this paragraph that we're talking about involve a binding contract that the district is already obligated to perform, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're not talking about creating a new obligation. We've already agreed to that contract and whatever the obligations are.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Item 6E, discussion of board policy, CAG local, purchasing and acquisition, vendor relations. This is a first read.
This is changing, the wording replaces the reference to the Office of Professional Responsibility to the Office of Internal Audit. It's on page 1 of 7, under investigations. The Office of the Professional Responsibility, OPR office, no longer exists.
That's it?
That's it.
Nothing else you want to change?
Well, don't ask that.
Item 6F, discussion of board policy DCB local employment practices, term contracts. This is the first reading. Go ahead.
Okay.
Give us a summary.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So in DCB, it speaks to term contracts. The information about CEIs and teacher evaluation, as we are aware, is in DNA. So that language has been struck. This is a TASB suggestion regarding Chapter 21 contracts and listing who gets the Chapter 21 contract. And that's the summary of what the intent of this revision is.
Are we adding athletic directors?
Athletic directors are certified teachers.
So all certified. Chapter 21.
Yes.
So they'll go through the same process.
Trustee Moore?
There is an aspect certification for principals, right? A specific classification category. I don't think there's one for assistant principals. It's just sort of an administrative classification.
I believe so.
And then teachers, counselors, diagnosticians, librarians. But I was unaware of an aspect certification for athletic directors.
It's not. It's because they're certified teachers.
Right.
So we could eliminate that group because it's embedded in another.
That's the reason why. Because if for any reason our operational practice changes, so that we hire athletic directors who are not in fact certified teachers, this would bind us to offer them Chapter 21 contracts when I don't think that's legally appropriate in that case because they're not Chapter 21 employees. So my only recommendation would be to strike that because if we're providing them term contracts because they're teachers, then that's already covered.
Would there be any other position other than athletic directors that would also be certified teachers? Instructional coaches?
We removed their contract because we moved their pay scale last year.
But they have to be certified teachers, right?
Not in order to do that job, though.
Well, can she answer? Do they have to be certified teachers?
It's no longer a requirement, I believe.
But are they certified teachers?
The majority are.
So why some and others? So you're saying you're getting all certified employees serving full-time because they fall on the SBIC, they're certified teachers. They have
The majority. There could be.
Yeah, but if you have an instructional coach or academic coach, majority, I would think they would be a certified teacher since they're coaching up other teachers, right?
The majority, but hypothetically, you could have someone who came from the university level who knows specific content who would not be a certified teacher.
So, but what's that majority of? Are majority nurses certified teachers?
No.
You have full-time nurses on here too.
Correct, they have a license.
But this is a Chapter 21 issue.
Right.
Not a qualification or...
Nurses are specifically Chapter 21 employees.
So if a instructional coach is a certified teacher, would they fall under the Chapter 21 since they're a certified teacher as an instructional coach? And why?
We removed the contract. When we moved the pay scale and made the job role more rigorous and increased the pay, they became at-will employees.
So to Trustee Morat's point, you're including athletic directors for what reason?
Because they actually teach.
Because they teach.
They could.
But so could instructional coaches if we put them in that position because of, for whatever reason.
Because we moved a lot of instructional coaches and put them in the classroom, and put them in the classroom, so how does that work? Do we change their job title?
If you become a teacher of record, you are contract eligible.
So if they once, that's not making sense to me. That's not making sense to me, because they have their certification, they're certified teachers, but they're instructional coaches.
Right, but
I guess I don't understand the athletic directors, and
you think they should or should not?
I don't understand what
We're just trying to understand your rationalization. Trustee Morath and then Trustee Blackburn have something?
I've only done one, so I can wait for Trustee Blackburn.
So, SBEC certified employees, who are they? What categories of people are they?
You have principals, assistant principals, teachers, nurses,
Counselors, librarians.
yes, media specialists, counselors, educational diags.
Those are all people that are certified by SBEC? Sound like what you just read, Mr. Law.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm asking for all the certifications that are provided by SBEC, not what the law says that we have to get Chapter 21 contracts to. What categories of employees can be certified by SBEC?
The group that Jack just shared?
That's the only group?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're the only ones required to have a certificate under Chapter 21.
I'm not talking about who's required. Somebody in the audience knows about SBEC and knows all the certifications that are required by, that are offered by SBEC. Jack, I don't think you know this question. No offense, but someone from HR knows what certificates are offered by SBEC. And I'm pointing this out because it says SBEC certified employees. And I'm questioning the term.
That was TASB recommended language. I would have to go back and discuss with TASB.
So I go back and ask, so are we saying that all SBEC certified employees are going to have a Chapter 21 contract?
Yeah. That's what I thought, but I'll double check it.
I see head going in different directions.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that.
So
Reminder, this is a first read, so maybe we need
that's
to
fine.
kick it back.
Because even I was concerned about the athletic directors, because we made a big deal a few months ago that the athletic directors, the athletic people were at will. So now we're going to give them a contract, whereas before they had been at will. Is that what you guys are going to do? You're going to change the stream now? Now you're going to give everybody in the athletic department a Chapter 21 contract?
What do you mean everyone in the athletic department?
Okay, everybody has athletic director behind their name. Assistant athletic director.
Those are central office positions. That is not who this was targeting.
We just hired an athletic director from San Antonio. We hired an athletic director. You want to be more clear about what you're thinking about?
It should be retermed as campus athletic coordinator.
Oh, so we're on a campus level.
Correct.
We're not at the central office level.
Correct.
But you know it doesn't say that.
Correct.
Because
First read, so we can make the correction.
What's our new athletic director's name?
Pardon?
What's our new athletic director?
Gil Garza.
Gil could read this and say, oh, I want a contract. And the assistant athletic director can say, oh, I want a contract also. You see my point?
Yes, I do.
I'm glad this is the first read. Okay, so the second bullet, employees and positions for which the district requires current SBEC certification. It's almost like 1 and 2 are saying the same thing, just one is a little more specific. Does it kind of seem that way to you? Maybe not, kind of, sort of. I'll leave you alone. We're going to see this again next month? Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Go back to Trustee Morath.
I was just going to suggest, because of the wording on number 1, it says SBEC certified employees. So I think a reasonable person could interpret that as I have an SBEC certification. regardless of what my position is, I'm entitled to a Chapter 21 contract. Of course. And your point is, if the role that they're fulfilling for the district is a role that requires an SBEC certification, then we're going to give them a Chapter 21 contract. I'm not entirely sure why we need that, because the law explicitly requires this. So all we're doing is saying we're going to comply with the law on the local policy. So I kind of two mutually contradictory recommendations. One would be that the language in bullet number 2 strikes me as the clearest language, and I would just remove bullet number 1 entirely. Because you don't want to imply that if you happen to have a teacher certificate and you work in the central office that you're entitled to a Chapter 21 contract. So that's, if you get rid of number 1 and you just went with number 2, then you pretty much cover that. But the different point was that having sat in so many employee hearings on this particular topic, the law is pretty clear. If you're doing a Chapter 21 related duty in a district, you've got a Chapter 21 contract whether the district offers it to you or not. And so my thought would be just to eliminate this policy entirely. And so change this from an amendment to just repealing the policy. And so we no longer have a DCB local, because there's no reason for us in a local policy to simply restate what the law already requires. That would be my recommendation for us moving forward on, second read is just to consider it as a repeal.
So I guess I need clarity. So they go back to instructional coaches that are teachers and they have a certificate. You just said they are basically Chapter 21. They have a contract.
This is my recollection from the hearings, is that if they're doing a Chapter 21 job for you, they're a Chapter 21 employee. Instructional coaches, while they do have an SBEC certification, they're not doing a Chapter 21 job. The instructional coach job is not a Chapter 21 job.
And academic coaches.
And just take this and kick the can a little bit more.
First you can. I'm Mike.
Okay.
You have the legal policy.
Okay. DCE, employment practices, other types of contracts. First
So-
read also.
Yes, sorry, Trustee Connell.
Yeah.
So the summary of this policy was to clarify for positions that are non-Chapter 21. The specific position, one of the positions that specifically targets is speech therapists. There are some central staff positions that departments have trouble retaining employees. And to the previous conversation we had about employee retention, the most difficult to staff role, for example, a bilingual speech therapist, ensuring that they are with us for the duration of a period of time rather than just letting it be a revolving door. Excuse me.
So you're just, go ahead, while I collect the funds. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to collect mine too. So this would be outside of Chapter 21 employees
Correct.
that you want to offer a contract to.
Correct.
For me, I'd like to see those positions identified
Okay.
because it's too open for me.
Okay.
So the positions need to be identified. I agree with you, but the positions need to be identified because some of those positions I might not agree on.
Sure.
So I think
makes sense.
it's a good idea
Okay.
to just identify the positions.
Okay. Okay.
Anybody else? So the, go ahead.
Well, there was some a reference to DCE legal. How is that different from DGBA?
I would need to pull it up.
the email that I sent earlier?
Yes.
Okay.
This particular one, your question is how is DCE local different from DCE legal?
Now, DC, you struck out DGBA in that third paragraph as far as file an appeal. So, and you took out the word file a grievance. And so there's something you're trying to say that's different. A grievance must be different from an appeal, and the grievance policy, DGBA, must be different from DCE legal. So I'm just asking what's the difference, what's the reason for that change?
Can I circle back on that one with you, Dr. Blackburn?
Are you asking for approval this month on this one?
No, this is a first read.
Okay. You received my email this morning?
Yes, but I was also in meetings this morning.
Okay. Delegation.
The DCE local talks about contracts not governed by Chapter 21, and that's why it's struck out.
Yeah, but the legal does not have a process.
Thank you for providing clarity, because I did see your message, but I didn't understand what you were asking teachers. So, I'll get an answer for you.
Anybody else? Okay. Now DH local employee standards of conduct. Also a first read.
DH local has several changes that were really being pushed forward by the audit committee. And so after the audit committee reviewed, administration also reviewed to reflect changes that were mutually agreeable. So if you look throughout DH local, it's really looking at the division of responsibilities between internal audit and the professional standards office to provide some clarification. And the changes throughout are to clarify.
When looking at the executive summary, it states the recommended policy changes are being brought forward to ensure alignment with the creation of the new professional standards office and to clarify reporting channel for suspected wrongdoing. Why are we just bringing this to the board now and not in May or June?
Last May or June?
When we established this office a while. So why are we just bringing this to the board now?
Because both departments needed to be up and running to have clarity on who would own what. As we have gotten further into the work, we have a greater understanding of what some of those divisions of responsibility should be.
Because we established that whole division of PSO and internal back in, do you remember, Mike, when we did the whole split?
The split between the former OPR merged in with internal audit in October of 2013.
The end of 2013.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Harville, the Professional Standards Office was initiated in January
2014.
of 2014.
But we changed the policy in the audit department in the summer of 2013. When the policy reads.
PSO did not exist at that point in time.
But when we dissolved OPR, when we said we would no longer have OPR, that happened in
There's still wording in policy that has the old OPR in there. And so it was to correct that, we're getting rid of some of those terminology in this policy and incorporating into that the internal audit function and then the professional standards office.
To go to page 2 of the policy, under employees' duty to work, employees' duty to report. it's appearing that the employees are expected to report only child abuse, neglect, fraud, misappropriation, or financial. So we're taking out, what about the violation of federal and state law, or the violation of other district policies, or violation of ethical standards for professional educators? Where is that going to be in the policy?
In terms of employee misconduct,
Under employee duty, employee's duty to report, employees shall report abuse and neglect in accordance with local policy and state law. But we're not dealing with federal. The violation of district policy, ethical standards, or professional educators.
if you go to 3 of 10,
Okay,
it
3 of 10.
Yes, it continues and goes into misconduct, etc. If you go further down that page near the bottom.
Employees suspect the superintendent of school. And so, Mike, employees suspect his or her supervisor. We discussed this in the audit committee, and so I thought it was coming back to a second read because on down, we have all the 4 areas, district fraud hotline. You know, we discussed that in the audit committee. So we're trying to keep all 3.
At this point, there was discussion in the audit committee. These were the same 4 that were discussed there. There were some different ideas that were expressed in the audit committee. If those are the pleasure of the board, they would be the ones to bring those up when recommending changes.
So what is your recommendation as the internal auditor? I did get your memo.
The thing that we want to avoid is confusion amongst employees and where to report, so that we can get information and there's information didn't fall into cracks or someone got lost. The fraud hotline, or excuse me, just a hotline really, is critical, I think, in that process. I hope that would be the primary source of collecting that information, because then it would be distributed either to my office, to Ms. Darville's office, or multiple places throughout the district. But the hotline is probably my personal number 1 preference.
Okay, and going back to that child abuse and neglect report, where on page, because you said it in your memo too, Mike, about,
yes, ma'am.
I have noticed that child abuse not included in this reporting process.
It's not. It has its own separate one that is detailed over in policy FFG.
So,
And the purpose of my note to you was to make sure that all of the trustees understood that there was a separate one for child abuse that's in FFG, and that is referenced in DH local. But the FFG refers to it going to the Dallas Police Department, Child Abuse Unit, Child Protective Services, Child Abuse Domestic Violence Prevention Office, and a campus administrator.
what page on DH local?
That is not in DH local. That's over in FFG.
But are you going to refer people in DH local that they can go to
It is.
FFG?
Yeah,
Where?
it is. Under that section called Employees' Duty to Report, the first sentence there does say see FFG series. That's when you go over there. I just wanted to make sure you understood that the 4 or 5 options we have on DH local vary a little bit from the child abuse situation, which is over at FFG.
And so how about federal law? Where do they report that? If you break federal law?
It's not federal law. The wording, I don't believe, is in here in DH local. Okay,
So violation of state, federal, or local. So are we going to add it in here to say, like FFG that you refer to, are we going to say somewhere? So employees will know when they go to the policy where, okay. Federal law is not, okay.
Federal law is not, and so that may be a change we want to consider.
Okay. Okay, on page 3, you guys are proposing that an employee who suspects a chief officer, deputy superintendent, or assistant superintendent or executive director of fraud, misappropriation, or financial shall report such matters to the chief of human capital manager or the chief internal auditor. The chief of human capital manager or chief internal auditor must authorize any investigation of anyone in the above position.
Yes, ma'am.
So can you clarify that?
That is a change under the current, from what's currently in policy. Currently that's in policy if there is an investigation that begins on either the superintendent and then we get into chief, deputy, assistant superintendent, then if there's an investigation started on one of those positions, that has to be reported to the board that an investigation is started. The change here would be the superintendent, if there is an investigation, would be reported to the board. However, those other positions, the chief, deputy, assistant, and the executive director now would not be reported to the board. However, before an investigation could start on those positions, either Ms. Darville in her position or myself in my position would have to authorize that investigation to start.
Okay, let me clarify. Let me understand. And it took me a couple times. An employee who suspects a chief officer, deputy superintendent, assistant superintendent, or an executive director of fraud, misappropriation, financial shall report such matters to the chief of human capital manager or the chief internal auditor. So the chief internal auditor and the chief of human capital manager are working together, because I'm trying to find out the line, because I thought the chief internal auditor reported to the board and the chief of human capital reported to the administration, reported to the superintendent, and there was a certain oversight for the chief internal auditor. So you said that you and Carmen would decide if an investigation goes forward.
It would depend upon the nature of the allegation.
So a call comes into the district fraud hotline, but they have the choice to come into the office of internal auditors, the professional standards office, and the police and security department. So they have 1, 2, 3 choices, and I can pick any choice. So who is the keeper of all of what comes in? Because if it's fraud, it falls under chief internal audit. I thought if it was PSO, like child abuse.
We shouldn't really be child abuse. We're more employee misconduct.
Yeah, employee misconduct fall under you.
Correct.
I thought when the board made this decision 2 years, is it 2 years?
Yeah.
A year ago?
A year.
Yeah.
Well, you said October. We made the decision because of OPR. Investigation happened. We needed to move the staff so they can have autonomy to do what they needed to do without repercussion of getting fired because they're doing their job. Now, sounds to me, I'm not understanding how we're reporting now.
So the case management system that internal audit has, the type of accusation would determine who receives that particular case. If it's going to be financial fraud, it's going to go to Chief Singleton. If it's employee misconduct, it would come my way.
But you and Singleton would decide if anyone in the above positions get investigated.
Correct. But I would decide on the ones that were the fraud and financial impropriety. Ms. Darville would decide on the employee misconduct.
You decide if it gets investigation, authorize
Yes.
any investigation of anyone in the above position. So why is it just these following position and not teachers? So who's going to decide if a teacher, assistant principal, clerk, custodian gets investigation? Is that an automatic, when it's reported, it's automatically investigated? Or why these positions are the ones that get a decision and not a list of teachers, custodians, cafeteria workers, assistant principals, and you decide on all employees? Why just these employees?
I think the reason being is because previously those positions were all notified to the board, and they are high-level administrative positions that now would not be notified to the board, but there needs to be some accountability so that either Ms. Darville or myself would authorize those, and there wouldn't be arbitrary investigations started on people at that level.
You can have the floor, Joyce. I'll come back my second round because your mouth open. Arbitrary is the key word. It's the key word here, investigation, so.
As a reminder, this is the first read.
But as
Go
a
ahead.
reminder, arbitrary investigation won't start. So you are the keepers and the gatekeepers, or who gets investigated and who not. You are the gatekeeper. So a teacher, a principal is open, just open season.
No, it's not.
No, you said to make sure that before it came to the board, and then just so it won't, arbitrary investigation won't happen. Interesting. You can have it, Jim.
Just to pick up a little bit on what Trustee Nuttall was asking, what was the rationale for removing the notification to the board for these high-level employees?
We want to ensure that if accusation does not have validity, that people's careers aren't affected at that level.
Well, you know that board members is affected by an investigation currently. So, my concern is that we don't get confused in what we're trying to do. And so, I personally think that that should be continue to come to the board until we define how a trustee is treated in this situation. And then just to move on, because I won't stay there, I don't need to. The second paragraph from the bottom is the change.
3 of 10?
I'm sorry, I'm still on 3 of 10.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Is the change language from CAA.
There are some variations there between CAA and DH local.
Okay.
It talks about employee misconduct versus moral and ethical behavior. Moral and ethical behavior was in CAA. Employee misconduct replaces that wording in DH local. All investigations versus investigations are variations also between CAA.
Confused.
Yes, ma'am.
Because moral and ethical was taken out of the statement in CAA, and I don't see where it returns in the local.
Moral and ethical would be embedded in employee misconduct.
I don't care for embeddment. I like to, I'm visual, and so I like to see certain things because we need to make sure that the standards for these employees that we're speaking of are at the same standards for all of our employees. And if it's not written, in many cases, it don't happen. So I'd like to see that particular language put back in there. And then the very last paragraph of 3 of 10, it talks about all inquiries from the suspected individual's attorney shall be directed to the investigating department's legal service counsel. So who is that?
Investigating department.
No.
Investigating department's legal counsel.
Correct.
Right.
Who is that?
Well, from what I understand, the board's internal audit unit would have legal services, and administration has legal services.
So I still don't know who that is. So who would determine who that legal counsel is? Say for instance, Ms. Darville decides that there needs to be an investigation. So would she choose the legal counsel from her department? Or if you decide, because you bifurcated the duties, and so how do we know which one's going to do the legal counsel?
Well, I wouldn't go to his for an issue. I would go to
your own legal
administration's legal counsel. I don't have my own legal services.
And so
I would
you
use my own legal counsel.
Okay, and who would be your legal counsel?
Right now, we would outsource it, or we're talking about getting an in-house attorney for internal audit.
More people. And your legal attorney would be who?
It would be the legal department.
Legal department. That's what I want to hear, is the legal department. We don't need to be hiring any more people. I wanted to hear that. And I'd like for that to be in here. I've got one other question. On item B on 410.
5B?
Yeah.
Okay.
It says that if the superintendent doesn't abide by a directive from the board president, that the board president shall notify the board immediately. I would like to see in that statement something to the effect of shall notify the board in writing within 10 days, so that there is a distinct understanding that the board needs to know. And that's it.
Trustee Jones, then
I was just going to comment that to Trustee Foreman, I'm not sure that we want to specifically restrict them from using outside counsel. I completely agree. We should use internal investigators as much as possible. But the difference between inside counsel and outside counsel is privilege.
I'm pretty smart.
So I don't think we want to deny ourselves the right to give legal advice that's privileged. So I would be opposed to that particular change.
I just have something for Trustee Foreman.
Trustee Jones, Michigan.
Did she have a question?
Yeah. On this particular page 4 of 10, Trustee, to cooperate with the investigation, the internal auditor should notify the board. We just put that in there. We put that in there when we had this problem because an investigation happened and the board was not notified. So that's why I see y'all taking that language out.
I don't believe it was in DH.
You know, it's a line through it.
Right. I don't believe that the change you're referencing, how you said it was recently changed, that change was in this policy. I think it was in another one.
No, I'm reading it. It says the internal auditor shall notify the board.
I see what you're saying.
And then it's a line through it.
Okay.
I don't know why you're changing that, because we put that in just as October of 2013. Because of the last investigation, the board was not notified. And so we felt for accountability, the chief internal auditor should notify the board. So that needs to stay in language.
And just want to make sure it's paragraph 5B on page 4.
4 of 10, paragraph B.
Got it. Okay.
Trustee Jones?
Thank you. When I read this originally, the background information, it says that this is being brought forward to ensure alignment with the creation of the new PSO and to clarify reporting channels for suspected wrongdoing. One of the things I didn't see as a companion document, I'd really like to see, is what are we meaning when we talk about a new PSO? Because nowhere has that been laid out, defined roles, responsibility, who's in charge. Because if PSO has a certain domain of expertise and also is an investigative unit, then I want to make sure that it has been given all the proper resources, requirements, and it meets the ability to carry out the types of things we're asking it to do. Employee misconduct is a pretty broad area, because some types of misconduct can fall under federal situations. For example, EEOC violations or things that go into that department. And to me, those types of investigations are very, very different than strictly just a basic, less than federally qualified problem, right? However you want to put it. The second thing is case management in these cases is also very important because of the nature of who does the investigation is equally as important as the fact that there is an investigation. And so one of the questions that has been out there is whether you have the right people doing the investigation to begin with. And for that, I think if you look around and you say, what's an ombudsman office look like in some other districts, I use Chicago or some other places, the type of people who are involved in that process are trained, they're qualified, and they have specific skill sets. And oftentimes that includes experience in policing powers or types of training that go within that. And that's a highly specialized set of things. And so I would really like to see more texture as far as if we're going to start to allocate responsibilities and get into specificity of who covers what and how it's handled, that we also take this opportunity to spell it out, especially if we're talking about a new PSO. The big issues for somebody such as myself who's been involved for years in risk management and in areas of compliance and relationships on fraud, waste, and abuse. I mean, the financial world is a very different world than talking about the public sector. I noticed that you guys want to eliminate the thing, anything of value, theft of anything of value, and I would caution taking out that language because the FBI and a lot of other groups say in the areas of the public sector and in the areas of public agencies, $1 is actually the threshold. And so, value has a different meaning than strictly size. I know in the corporate world we'd use a higher threshold, but in public agencies and in the public sector, the public's trust is the paramount thing you're trying to make sure you uphold and defend and protect. So, we're public servants, and these are public funds, so I think we've got to be very careful about how we talk about a number of things. The two other things that I feel aren't really well understood in the current draft, and I'd like a little more detail on that, is you want to have independence. I think that's a really good standard when you do investigations. And you want to make sure that there are no conflicts, or whether perceived or actual. The problem with what I'm reading is that if you have high-level officials who are, there's a need for an investigation, I think that should always go to an independent body. I think it's not a very good... I think it's not a very good standard to, in any which way, ever put anybody in a compromised position. So I think that we should think a little harder about, the chief of internal audit is by definition has to be independent. I mean, that's a role, a responsibility, a duty, even a fiduciary and a governing standard of both the role, the responsibility, and everything else. So, but a person who's a chief in in a division or otherwise, even the superintendent, that may or may not be as clear. And I think for everybody's sake, you want any investigation to be at a high standard of independence so that you can find the truth and make sure that justice is carried out. So I think to the extent we can reinforce there's no conflicts or take away the possibility of conflicts in the way we design policy, that should be a first thing. The second thing is we should always look for and make sure that the key parties being reported to or handling investigations are as independent as possible, and also have the qualified expertise to do the investigations we're asking them to do. And then the third thing is that we make sure that we set those standards now. And I'd like to take this opportunity, because the first time the OPR was set up with a lot of these particulars already built in, that's been changed, and now we're under a new kind of model. So I would hope that that's part of our due diligence right now, that before we change policy, or as we change policy, we make sure we're very clear about how all this is going to work mechanistically and structurally and functionally, and that we also make sure we're doing it to the proper standards of how a large district with the types of resources and risks that we have and the types of control systems we want to make sure we are supporting gets this done. So I would think that this is a good moment, and I'm glad this is a first read, that we tackle that. We do have a police department. They do a very fine job. They're qualified officers to do certain kinds of investigations. Again, we already have a lot of qualified expertise that is by definition able to do certain things. I think that the roles and responsibilities should be designated where they're best served and where the district is able to do the most good in managing these areas. Thank you.
Trustee Michigan?
Well, I had a point that would have been better connected about 45 minutes ago, but I was, with respect to what Carmen said about why you would notify only